Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Dux-Soup webinar, where Giles, the head of professional services, will show you how to transfer your LinkedIn messages to your CRM using Dux-Soup Turbo. We'll also have a live chat where you can ask questions related to this webinar's topic, and I will do my best to answer them. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A with Giles. Thank you for joining us today, and let's start our webinar.
Thank you, Jin, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone, wherever you may be in the world, and thank you for joining us for the latest in our series of free Dux-Soup webinars. Today, we'll be taking a look at why and how you can get your LinkedIn messages to appear on your chosen platform, depending on your requirements, of course. Now, for anyone who is new to Dux-Soup, or indeed these webinars, my name is Giles Garnett, and I'm head of professional services here at Dux-Soup. I've been presenting the webinars for Dux-Soup for the last couple of years, and I also run the booster sessions and the technical calls, as well as some of the support calls. So I may well have come across some of you if you've had direct dealings with Dux-Soup. And as always, I'll do my best to share my knowledge of Dux-Soup and the experiences I've picked up in using the product, both from my own activities and those from our users. As usual, Jin, who you just heard from, our head of customer support, will be monitoring the live chat and answering as many questions as possible. Please do try to keep your questions on topic so that they're useful for the entire audience. And if you have other questions, you can always contact our support team via the live chat on our support pages or via our email, which is info@dux-soup.com. That will be on the screen later. And as always, the webinar session is being recorded, and hopefully a little more successfully than 4 weeks ago, and will be made available via the usual channels. Today's topic is focusing on the Turbo product, Dux-Soup Turbo. So you'll need a Turbo subscription in order to take advantage of the features that I'm going to be talking about today. If you don't yet have a Turbo subscription, you can, when you sign up for Turbo, your first week is free. It's a no obligation free week. So feel free to try it out if you want. And if you're new to Dux-Soup Turbo and need a starter's guide, have a look through our previous webinars on our website, and you'll see a selection of presentations and webinars there where we can go through in detail how to set up your system accordingly. So I'm not going to go through the basics of Dux-Soup Turbo today. I'm going to assume that because you're attending this webinar, you have a certain level of knowledge already. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay, and that's the email address at the bottom of the screen there for support questions if it's off topic today. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Why do you want your messages in a different environment outside of LinkedIn? We're going to walk through some examples. We're going to touch upon Salesforce and Zoho. We'll mention Pipedrive and Hubspot as well, and then we're going to look at a couple of other possibilities, ClickUp and Slack, and then if other people have got other CRMs that you're particularly, if there's lots of users of other CRMs, then maybe that'll come up in the Q&A later, or let Jin know via the chat if there's other CRMs that you're particularly interested in knowing more about, and we can sort of maybe talk about those during the Q&A. So one question which comes up whenever I mention the topic of bringing your LinkedIn messages into another platform is basically, why would I want to do that? Well, there are any number of reasons. Depending on your point of view and personal situation preferences. Some people are happy to work 100% within LinkedIn and manage their messages from within that platform. But there are lots and lots of people who prefer to work from within a CRM environment, either because of process requirements or the business requirements, perhaps another platform where they manage either their leads and contacts or even just their day-to-day activities. You can simplify your approach by using a single CRM environment. If you've got multiple accounts and multiple users sharing data, then you can have everything in one place in a CRM, and you have full visibility as to where people are within your lead generation process. You then also have, of course, visibility across the team if you're using that sort of a platform. So bearing all of that in mind, I'm going to walk through briefly some examples and hopefully give you some ideas as to what is possible today. I'm not going to go through everything absolutely to the nth degree, because if I did, we might be here until midnight. I'll try to highlight what's important to consider when setting up this sort of solution, and hopefully open your eyes as to what the possibilities are. Now, we already have our launched integrations with HubSpot and Pipedrive. And with HubSpot and Pipedrive, it's possible to see your message exchanges within those appropriate platforms logged against your contact. And that's all managed through the CRM section of your Dux-Dash. So I'm going to go to let's come out of the presentation a second, and let's go to Pipedrive. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. I'll zoom in a fraction there. So this is Pipedrive, which I think many people will be familiar with. And as you know, as you're probably aware, when you have it all set up through the Dux-Dash, just very quickly go to your Dux-Dash here. You go to your CRM connections here in the bottom left-hand corner, and depending on how you've enabled your Pipedrive or HubSpot account, you then get to see here under your activities. There we go. You have your incoming messages, you have your message exchanges here within Pipedrive. And similarly within HubSpot, you can see here against this particular contact, you can see your Dux-Soup messages today appear here as activities under each of your contacts which have been brought in. They get mapped across accordingly based upon the matchup of the LinkedIn ID. So if you're going to then go outside of HubSpot or Pipedrive, you will then need to use a platform such as Integromat or Zapier, both of which have a high level of functionality embedded from the Dux-Soup with our integrations. Once you have a Zapier or Integromat account, the setup of these sorts of solutions can be quite intuitive, and it's just making sure that you have a clear idea of the data you want to gather and where you want it to appear. So let's have a look at a fairly straightforward example, such as Salesforce. So here I have a Salesforce account set up. I'll zoom in again a little bit. And here I've got some contacts that I've imported, carrying out some visits to profiles through LinkedIn. And what I've been able to do then here in Zapier, I'm going to go to my Zapier page here now, and I can look here, I've got here a Zap that's already been turned on, messages as tasks to Salesforce. So let's have a look at this one here, and we'll just do a walkthrough, so hopefully you can understand what's happening here in order for this to work. So I'm using the LinkedIn, the Dux-Soup LinkedIn trigger here, the new LinkedIn message event in Dux-Soup. Here you can, when you're looking at your triggers within LinkedIn, you choose your app. So I'm using the Dux-Soup and I'm looking at new LinkedIn message events. Sorry, I'll slow down a little bit. Of course, you then link your account and you test the trigger. What I've done then is I've done a lookup to find the record in Salesforce. So I then here again put my Salesforce credentials in here. I want to do a find action here, choose my event, my account, and then I set up the account, the action. And this is where there's a really, really important step to consider. Within Salesforce, in fact, within any CRM, if you're doing this, my recommendation would be to create the minimum of 2 new custom fields within your CRM to make it really easy to link all of your data that's coming out of LinkedIn. Now, the first one, let's just go over to my Salesforce account again here. If I just take, let's just take this example here. Let's have a look at the details of this individual here. What you'll see here, I've created 2 custom fields. One is the LinkedIn ID and one is the LinkedIn URL. Because I've created these 2 new custom fields, I can then make sure that I'm always running with unique contacts and not duplicating my contacts. Creating custom fields within Salesforce is really quite straightforward. I won't go through it now, but actually on our blog pages, I'll try to find the blog towards the end. It's documented in one of our previous blogs where we've talked about Salesforce, how to create custom fields within Salesforce. We'll also talk about it when we go to Zoho shortly as well. So I've created these 2 custom fields here. So I've got the LinkedIn ID unique number from LinkedIn, and I've got the URL as well. Let's go back to our Zap a second. So what I'm doing then here is I'm doing my find record in Salesforce, and I'm looking by this field, my custom field that I've created, my LinkedIn ID. That then links to the ID of the sender of the message. This is the message, the incoming message event, which is part of the regular data that comes in when Dux-Soup captures a message. What I do then is I say, right, I've got my record, and now I want to create a new record in Salesforce here. So if again, choose my account, create a record, link the correct account, and then set up my action. And here I'm creating a task within Salesforce. Out of my search result, it's dynamically pulled the ID number from the search result above, and then I can fill in all of the others. Here we go. So I've got LinkedIn message. I'm going to actually let's rename that so we can see it come in. I call it a new LinkedIn message. There we go. You can change that to whatever you like, of course. And then what I've done down here, I've assigned it to myself, and then I've just grabbed here the text of the message and the URL of the conversation. Now I could also put in here some other fields. Maybe maybe I'll put in here from, and now add some more data here because this comes in the payload of data. So I'm going to say it's from this particular person, Menno, and then I'll put his surname as well. There we go. Then I'm going to leave all of that as it is. Not going to bother putting anything else in there. Press continue. And now if I do a retest and have this message sent through to Salesforce, there we are, a record was just sent to Salesforce. If I now go to Salesforce and I have a look at this particular person at the top here, we will notice that, there we are, my new LinkedIn message has just come in. So before I'd done a test form, which was LinkedIn message, this is the new LinkedIn message. And we can see here, the message has come in and I can see who it's from. I can see it's already linked to him there. So, and therefore starts to build up my tasks. Here's to come in as a task here. And it's linked to the contact that was already existing within Salesforce. Really straightforward to do. And as you can see here, I've got that one turned on. Now I'm not actually running the message bridge at the moment, otherwise I'd be inundated with lots of data right now. But that way you can actually say, right, map the data across according to the text and the information that you want to have in there. Make sure it's linked to the correct record in Salesforce, and then it therefore, as we can see here, appears against the correct person in Salesforce. I'm sure many of you are much more conversant in Salesforce than I am, but that at least gives you a flavor as to what can be achieved. What we can then look at, for example, then is with Zoho. If we look at a very similar thing with Zoho, so this is my Zoho environment. And what I've done here is I've actually, again, created here a LinkedIn ID and a LinkedIn URL field. I think it's even easier to create custom fields within Zoho. Let's have a look. Here we go to fields. So you can see here under my contact information, I've created these two, LinkedIn ID and LinkedIn URL. You can, of course, add more. Maybe you LinkedIn connection degree, you know, whether it's a first, a second, or third degree connection, that sort of information as well. But similarly here, so I've now got my my CRM. Let's go back to my contacts here. Again, I've done this in Zapier, and we'll come on to an Integromat example a little bit later. What are we doing? Yeah, let's go back to another Zap with Zoho. Very similar example to Salesforce. So again here, messages to Zoho. So let's have a look at this one here. A lot of this is very similar sort of feeling to Salesforce. Again, I have the LinkedIn message event in Dux-Soup set up here. And again, you can see the payload of data that comes in here. You get the URL of the message, the text of the message, who it's from, their ID, first name, last name, etc., etc. So that's the data that we can work with. I can then do a search for that contact. So I've then done the search for the contact. Here, I do look at it here, and it's come up with wherever it is. It gives me an answer here somewhere. Yeah. And then when you create your task in Zoho, this is where you then you set up the create task. You link your account accordingly. You set up the action. This is where you then again, I've called it here new LinkedIn message. Let's call it something else so we can see it come in. Another new LinkedIn message. There we go. I've just put an arbitrary date in there. We'll go down here, get some of these standard fields that you can have. You have to make sure it's coming out of your contacts, and the contact ID comes from the search result above. And again, here I've got the text of the message and the link, the URL to the message. If I now press continue, and again, if I go here and I press retest, we should then see that message come through again into Zoho. Any second now, there we are. A task was just sent to Zoho. So if I go into Zoho and I look at my activities, there we are, another new LinkedIn message. We can see that that's come in just now. There we are, 5:15 my time, 5:15, absolutely perfect. Now, you can also have messages come in which aren't linked to an existing contact. So these ones here are linked to an existing contact. But I've done here in the past, you can have them come in and not have them linked. And therefore you would then, of course, want to link back to the person. And this is where we then would also look at perhaps other platforms where maybe you don't have all of your contact people in your database already. So one thing that I've spoken to a few people about recently is a platform called ClickUp. So here, this is ClickUp here. And this is sort of a workflow a process building thing where you can track all of your activities and your goals, etc., etc. So here within ClickUp, in a similar way to what I've done there, of course I don't have my maybe I don't have all of my contacts in here, but what I can do is I can create activities in here for me to then follow up on. So again, if I go into Zapier, do this one in Zapier, and then we'll move into Integromat shortly. So again here, messages to ClickUp. This is even more straightforward because of course you're not matching data against an existing contact. So exactly the same here, a new LinkedIn message event in Dux-Soup, exactly the same as before, exactly the same data. So that's there. If I now go to create a task in ClickUp, this is where I'm going to create a task. I choose an account, it's mapped against myself, and then I set up the action. So here it's in my workspace, etc., etc., etc. And what I've chosen to import here is a URL to the conversation, the first and second name of the sender, and then the text of the message. And that's useful because what I can do then I have it assigned to myself, for example, there. If I now test this action, there's the payload of data, retest and review. There we go. Task was just sent to ClickUp and we've just seen it update. If I now go to my notifications, let's reload the page. Any second now. There we go. I've got a new LinkedIn message. It's been assigned to me. Okay, well, I don't know who it's from, but what I can do then dynamically from here, I can go into here, I can see it's from this person here. There's my message. And if I click on here, that takes me straight to the message within LinkedIn. So I can then dynamically go straight to that place and pull up that message and then action that accordingly, say that I've completed my task and then move on. It's a way to be able to manage your workflows and be able to have full visibility of it within one place and really organize everything. The final one I want to just talk about today, rather than going into loads of detail about these, because I want to give you a chance to have questions at the end, is if we talk about maybe a platform that a lot of people are using increasingly, especially when they're working as in a collaborative organization or virtual groups, should we say, is Slack. So what I've got here is, let's just open Integromat. I'll show you this one in Integromat. That's probably the just to show that this can all be done in both Zapier and Integromat. What I've done here is I've done a quick Dux-Soup to Slack integration. Now with Integromat, I'm having to use the webhooks as opposed to that Dux-Soup trigger. So again, if you look back at some of our previous webinars, you can see that. But basically what I've got here is I've got a watch event, which is Dux-Soup listening out for message events. I'm then putting a filter in to only pick out messages. So you can see here, it's just a data type of member to member. Hopefully that means something to some of you. And then here in Slack, you can see here what I've done is I've then said, right, I would like to then, in my private channel of message testing, I want this data from my webhook to come through into Slack. So if I now, how can I test this? So what I have here is I have my message testing Slack channel accordingly. Let's shrink that down a little bit. We'll put it over there. If I now go to my Dux-Soup options, and this is the top one here, this is the URL of my webhook. If I now send some sample data across to that webhook. This is on, so hopefully it should. There we go, I think. There we go. We can see there at 20 past 5, I've had this message just come through. Messages from this guy here. It's from Rodrigo Ramos. There's the URL to the message. I can now then see that message. Now you could of course add a lot more information into there. If we think about the payload of data that comes through in a message, let's see if I can pull out some data a second to show you what's in there. But basically you also get your user ID, so you know who it's come from, especially if you're working in a team. That's not going to work, is it? Because I need to send some sample. There we go. There we go. So we can see here, this is the sample data here. So we see it's a message received piece of data. You can see here that it's this user ID identifies this as my Dux-Soup account. I could then link that to myself, to my own LinkedIn account, and therefore be able to dynamically go to that profile. Of course, if you're working in a team and you've got multiple accounts to manage, that would be important to know who it's come from, because you wouldn't be able to view a message from someone else, from someone else's LinkedIn profile. So that's kind of important as well. But what I want to illustrate here is how easy it is and how quick and straightforward it can be to get these messages to appear anywhere. Now, I built this same integration as well here in, earlier I built it here above in Zapier. And you can see here there, the message has come through, but then I've also done it here from Integromat. Exactly the same information comes through, and it's dynamic. It happens immediately. It arrives in a timely manner, exactly where you want it. So let me just continue. There we go. So what I wanted to really try to demonstrate today is the versatility of all of these options. Now, hopefully in the questions in a second, we're going to find out some more CRMs that people are using, and we can talk about a few scenarios that way as well. Remember to check if your CRM is already integrated within Zapier or Integromat, maybe both, and you've got the options of both. It's worth checking that out. Zapier tends to have more integrations than Integromat, but Integromat is increasing all the time. I find building Zaps is a little more intuitive personally than Integromat, but Integromat sometimes gives you more options and is priced at a slightly lower price point than Integromat, depending on the number of tasks that you're using. But all of these different platforms give you the options to get your data where you want it, when you want it, to then be able to action it further. And it depends on the complexity. Is it just first degree connections, messages that you want to put somewhere? You have all of these options with the filters. You can go down into real sort of nitty gritty detail when it comes to doing these things. But what I wanted to do is give you at least a flavor. We've talked about Pipedrive, we've talked about Hubspot, we've talked about Salesforce and Zoho from a CRM perspective, which I think covers the majority of users. Somebody's now going to enlighten me otherwise. And then I've also, just from a workflow point of view, talked about ClickUp and also Slack as a platform to be able to manage your workloads. And the important thing was I wanted to really demonstrate the versatility of these various tools. There we are. There's our and there we are, I pressed the wrong button. There we go. So yeah, those are the platforms that we've talked about today. We will maybe mention a few more bits and pieces during the Q&A in a minute. But I'd now like to move on to what's coming up next. In 2 weeks' time, really exciting presentation. We've got Dennis, who's a CRM and lead generation expert and the founder of Drop Contact. He's going to be presenting building an end-to-end LinkedIn lead generation process. He's going to be talking about Pipedrive CRM specifically, automating your LinkedIn outreach campaign, then using Dux-Soup, and then working alongside Drop Contact and multi-channel workflows. So that's coming up in 2 weeks' time, which is going to be a really, really interesting thing. I know we had a guest speaker 2 weeks ago as well, which went down very well, very popular and very well received. And then 2 weeks after that, so on the 7th of December, yes, folks, it's nearly December already, our founder Will is going to be doing a Q&A, a live Q&A as the webinar. So get your questions for Will in now. You can put them on the chat to Jin, and she can put them to one side. If anyone's got a question for Will, put it in the chat. That'd be great. You can also post them via the email address that's at the bottom of the page there, or even via the Facebook page. Put them on there, put them in as a comment, and our team will pick them up accordingly. Opportunity for you guys, or for the user base, to get out there and have a direct question, a conversation with Will about how things have gone this year, what's coming next, what our expectations are going forward with Dux-Soup, and how the product is going to develop going forward. You can even ask him what his favorite cheese is if you want. Okay, so that's the upcoming webinars. I'll just promote the booster and technical calls as always. Booster sessions for starters, for the beginners, technical sessions to get your zaps or your integrations, or maybe your campaigns up and running. So yeah, you can book those via the website or via the support team via the email address that was on the page just now. I've talked for long enough. I think it's time for Jin to raise some questions, perhaps.
No worries. We have quite a few questions. So the first question would be, do you have an example how to create a timeline entry in HubSpot and not a task?
I'm making a note of that because I have not created a timeline entry in HubSpot. So I don't know the answer to that, hand on heart. And I think to click around and for me to try and find the answer now would be probably take up a bit too much time. So I don't know the answer to that. Timeline entry in HubSpot rather than an activity, was it?
I would recommend this user to email Dux-Soup support with the same question, and then we will test it out and we will get back to you. Our email is info@dux-soup.com.
It's at the
or you
bottom
can
of
go
the
to you can go to our website and then just email us through the website.
Cool. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, timeline. I've made a note of it as well, Jin, and we can talk about that one later as well.
Thank you. Another question would be, what is webhook? How do you get the webhook? Would you be able to explain where you can find webhooks?
Of course I can, and I did put that caveat at the beginning. You know, I was going quite quickly because I have to assume certain things. So with Dux-Soup, if I just go to my Dux-Soup icon here in the top right hand corner, hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. Let's zoom in a fraction just to make it a bit bigger. If I click on my Dux-Soup icon here in the top right hand corner and I go to my options button, this of course gives you access to your sort of the engine room of Dux-Soup, as we call it. If you've got Dux-Soup Turbo, you then have this option here, the connect option here. And this is where you can have, where you can define webhooks which will receive details of events that occur in Dux-Soup and LinkedIn. And these are unique URLs which basically listen for data. Now in Zapier, let's go to Zapier very quickly, because there are slightly different ways to create what we call a webhook, depending on what platform you're working on. If I go to Zapier and I press create a Zap, I can create a webhook which listens out for data. If I now in here type webhook, so webhooks by Zapier, if I now say, right, I want to, what we call get a catch hook, this is where get a Zapier URL. This is probably the easiest way to explain it, hopefully. This then creates here my custom webhook URL, and that's then unique to me. I copy that. I then paste that into my Dux-Soup options. Let's create a new one down here. There we go. And let's just grab some visit data. There's different types of events, and you can read all about this on our support pages and in what we call our knowledge base. Here, all of these options here, but I'm just going to grab some visit data for this particular example. If I now press continue, and I now listen, if I now do a test and listen for some data, so let's press the test button there and send some sample data to this unique URL here. If I press send sample data, confirm that. Let's test the trigger again, and what we should see now is some data coming through. So this is some sample data from Dux-Soup here, and we can tell it's live because Zulu time, it's 4:30 GMT time. That's 4:30. This is just some sample data that is hard coded into the integration. See here, this is the information that comes through. This is the payload of data. All the examples of the data that comes through. Do a similar thing in Integromat, but there's also this is probably going down a bit of a rabbit hole. Sorry. If I now go to webhook test site, you can also test to see all of the data that comes out of a webhook. This here for this example here, I've got this unique URL here. I've got this one here. If I now copy this URL here and I go to my options and I put that one in there and send some sample data, and I'll bring all of these sample data through to the webhook test site. In a second, we will see all of the data come through from all sorts of bits and pieces that I've just sent through to here. There we are, it'll all come through in order, the visits, the messages, everything. Here you can now see the payload, what we call the payload, all of the data comes through against, that gets sent to a webhook. So this is some visit data, this is some scan data, this is an action data. You can see all of these labels sort of tell you what it is. I'm just looking for the message one. There we are, there's the message one. There's a message received event with the text and everything. And by having the sample data, it helps you to be able to then match the fields up, map them across to make sure that the right data is appearing in the correct field of your CRM. Now, with Zapier, you don't need to use the webhooks so much anymore because we have those Dux-Soup triggers now. In Integromat, you do need to use the webhooks, but it works in pretty much exactly the same way. When I say about the triggers here, if I just go to, let's just, let's go back and let's just create a new Zap a second, just to show you what I mean by not having to use the webhooks in Zapier. Here, the trigger, rather than using the webhook, which is down here, I can now put in here just the Dux-Soup trigger. We have here these different trigger events, and basically it's logged against your account if you carry out a visit, if a message event is received, if a connection event is received, or if there's an action event that's executed. All of these things Dux-Soup will listen out for and post that data across accordingly, without you having to go down, where was it? This route here. The things that definitely need webhooks at the moment are the Integromat ones, and also if you do a dynamic link into, for example, a Google Sheet like this one here. But that's really going down a rabbit hole, and I've probably waffled on for far too long against that answer. Sorry, Jim.
It's okay. A lot of users are asking which CRM would you recommend?
Blimey.
Dux-Soup Turbo.
I personally cannot recommend a CRM because for my day-to-day work, I don't use one. I have experience of using through Dux-Soup. I've used Pipedrive, I've used Hubspot, I've used Salesforce, and I've used, to a lesser degree, Zoho. I have to say, I really have been impressed with the simplicity and clarity of Zoho. I really quite like that. It's not dissimilar in many ways to Pipedrive. I found them quite similar, quite intuitive. I think for more complex or for higher level requirements, I think Salesforce and HubSpot are also very good from my experience. There are increased levels of complexity probably with HubSpot and Salesforce, especially Salesforce. It's much, it seems to be a much more complex platform, and probably other people there maybe would also correct me. But yeah, I think from a usability, from being able to sort of dip your toe in and test things out, I found Pipedrive and Zoho incredibly accessible, very straightforward to get up and running. If you have a higher level set of requirements, I would probably look at HubSpot or Salesforce. But I put my hand on my heart, and I don't know what all of the pricing brackets are for them all. They all have slightly different pricing models depending on how you're using them. So yeah, I know there are others out there as well, and I wouldn't want to discount them as well. I would not make an absolute recommendation because it very much depends upon your requirements and your team's requirements as well, and the scalability, as I say, with regards costs. Because I know, for example, Zoho charges per user per month. Yeah, depending on how many seats, how many users you have, and also I think you get up to like 10,000 records, I think, is standard. And then if you want to go beyond that, you then have to pay incrementally. So yeah, I believe Salesforce is more expensive than that, but I may be wrong. So don't quote me on that one, please.
Thank you.
No problem.
Another question would be, one user noticed that we have a new button, enroll button on Dux-Soup, and they're asking what is it for?
Well spotted. Right, okay, so yeah, some of you may or may not have noticed that today, let's go to my LinkedIn page. Oh, that's one thing I should mention. Yeah, this is me. This is my LinkedIn page. Feel free to send me a connection request if you haven't already. I know I've connected with many of you over LinkedIn already. Feel free to connect, send me a connection request. Find me on LinkedIn. Just look me up under Dux-Soup or Giles Garnett. There's not many people on LinkedIn called Giles Garnett, so you should be able to find me. Yeah, put a message as well to say you found me via the Dux-Soup webinars. Yes, there is a new button on Dux-Soup. Let me just go to a list a second. There we go. Let's go there. Just wait for the robot to pick that up. 1 second. There we go. So Dux-Soup at your service. But we see here, you can now. Previously, we had the visit profiles, visit and connect and scan profiles. You can now enroll profiles from Dux-Soup. It's the new version 7.9.3. It was released to the Chrome Web Store earlier today. I think it was released to free range users yesterday, I believe, maybe even Sunday. It was over the weekend, I believe. But yeah, it was actually released onto the Play Store today. So check to make sure you're up to the latest version 7.9.3. You now have the ability to enroll profiles into a campaign without visiting. And what Dux-Soup will do, it'll look to see whether people are, whether the contact that you have on your list or on your search result. If we are, let's go to search result here a second. There we go. So here we are. I've just got a search result here, and Dux-Soup will then have a look at the list and look to see whether people are first or second degree connections and enroll them into the chosen or defined campaign. Of course, this is campaign related, so it's only visible for Turbo users. And maybe Jin wants to add anything onto that as well. I'm not sure I've explained that from a very high level point of view there accordingly.
Sorry, I was replying to live chat messages. What was the question?
I was just, yeah, is there anything else that you want to add to that? It's just basically the ability to enroll profiles. Dux-Soup will look at the list that's on the page there,
yes,
grab the URLs and the ID and enroll those people accordingly into the chosen campaign that you have defined.
Yes, and this is applicable for first degree and second degree connections, the same as the previous function which we had, which was the widget one, where we could enroll just by clicking. And now
so you still have that ability there where you can pick out the people, but rather than having to go through and click everyone now, you can actually say, yes, everyone on in this list I want to enroll. You just press the enroll profiles, and that just queues the messages up on the remote control accordingly, depending on your time delay. So if, for example, you had a 4-string message to all your first degree connections, which started in 2 days, if this was a list of first degree connections, it would queue up a load of messages to all your first degree connections on that list to start going out in 2 days. You don't then have to visit each of the profiles to be able to enroll them. Similarly, if they were not in first degree connections, it would queue up the invitation and send that in due course.
That's it for me. I just want to clarify one thing. We have direct Pipedrive and Hubspot integrations. You do not need Zapier or Integromat. So it's just a direct integration. You download a connector and no other programs is needed. So if you are thinking of getting CRM, you can think about Pipedrive or HubSpot, because you will not need Zapier or Integromat, because you do need to pay for Zapier and Integromat.
Yeah, indeed, that's a very good point, and thank you for that, Jin. Just to add to that, in order to be able to install the CRM connections, as it were, you go to, let's go to it properly. So if I just click on my Dux-Soup icon, I go down to the Dux dash down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Over on the left-hand side, you look at your CRM connections, and this is where you can then add a Pipedrive or a HubSpot account. You need to have the correct level of authority in order for it to when you first set it up, because Dux-Soup has to create a few new fields in order for it to work correctly. And you have all sorts of options then available, and it's all documented on our support pages. You don't need to use Zapier or Integromat, or pay any extra money if you want to use HubSpot or Pipedrive. What I've tried to show you today is to show the versatility of all the possibilities. You can send your messages to almost anywhere. I mean, in the past, we've done tracking spreadsheets in Google Sheets. You can have the messages sent to Google Sheets or an Airtable or anywhere you want. Not quite the moon, but maybe we should work on that. But yeah, that's a really good point, Jin, and well worth reiterating. You don't need Zapier or Integromat to get these integrations working. And maybe that's a question that people would like to ask Will in a month's time, is what further integrations may be coming. You know, that might be an interesting one to ask him. Cool. And I've pressed the wrong button again there. No further questions, Jin?
No, that's it from me.
Cool. It just leaves me to say thank you to everybody who's joined us for today. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope it's given you some ideas, food for thought. Ping a message to support if you need help on these things, and we can do what we can, and we'll look into the timeline entry on HubSpot. That's one for us to look further into, and I'll leave it to Jin to sign off, and I'll speak to you all in a couple of weeks.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions. If you have any further questions, please go to our website. There's support, live chat, or you can send us an email, and we will be happy to advise you further. So thank you very much, and see you on the next webinar.